Good morning, everyone. Yaakov, nice to see you. Hillel, nice to see you. Today is a special day. It's the 11th of Shevat, so we'll get right down to it. And we're going to farbreng a little bit, talk a little bit about the specialty of yesterday and today. So in 1950, 71 years ago, on this Shabbos, 71 years ago, at about 8 or so, 10 to 8, I think, in the morning, the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yitzchak, passed away suddenly. It was not expected. He was ill for many, many years, and he passed away.
Was it Shabbos?
It was Shabbos. It was exactly the same kriyas like this year, Shabbos, 71 years ago. And,
okay.
And so the Chassidim Shabbos, you're not supposed to mourn Shabbos, but versteht sich, it was a very difficult Shabbos. And Motzei Shabbos, they did the Tahara. And it's interesting that Zalman Schechter says, I don't know how he knows this, but I guess he saw the person. He says he was standing with the Rebbe who was called the Ramash. The Rebbe's Hebrew initials is Mem Shin. So Ramash, right, there was the Rashag, Reb Shmaryo Garari, the older brother-in-law, and the younger brother-in-law is the Ramash. So he was standing with the Ramash outside of the previous Rebbe's room, which is a second floor in 770. 770 has 4 floors. The basement, the first level you walk in, where the Rebbe's Yechidus room is to the left, where the Rebbe sat. To the right is the Beis Medrash. All the way to the right, facing closest to Eastern Parkway, is the Merkez office. On the second floor was the apartment of the previous Rebbe. And on the third floor was the apartment of Rabbi Garari and Rabbi Garari. That was the way the 770 was since 1941 till the end. Anyway, so the Rebbe was standing there and saying Tillim. That's what you're supposed to do when you're next to a body. You're supposed to say Tillim. There's not time to it says Tillim. And he's saying Tillim, and the Chevra Kadisha person came out of the room, and Alma says that it was someone from the Chaim Berlin. I guess he knew him. He wasn't a Lubavitcher. He was a Yid that was involved in Chevra Kadisha, Chaim Berlin. For us listening to this today, it's like a Chaim Berlin person was doing the Tahara on the Frierdiker Rebbe. That's pretty amazing. You ask Lubavitcher of the last 50 years, he wouldn't believe it. But that's what Solomon said. Anyway, now, I'm not saying there weren't other Lubavitcher there. There were. Rabbi Jacobson, he was the head of the, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, so he comes out and he asked the Ramash, the Rebbe, questions of Chabad custom regarding the Tahara. And Zalman answered this to me because I asked Zalman if he and his friends had a sense who would be the next Rebbe. That's what I asked him when I interviewed him in my interview with him in Boulder in 2010. So he said to us, he says to me and to us, it was a given fact that he will be the Rebbe. And he says a proof is here I'm standing with him saying Tehillim, and the guy comes out from the room doing the Tahara. He doesn't go to the older brother-in-law to ask his shilas. He goes to the younger brother-in-law because in Torah knowledge he was gifted, and he was a big guy, much bigger in learning. So when it comes to a shaila of halacha and custom regarding Tahara, there's no place here for chassidus. You got to give the halacha. You got to give the minig. So he went to the Ramash. So this happened much last night, 71 years ago. Okay, then another thing happened that night that I heard just about a month ago or so from someone who heard it from Rabbi Zalmanov. Rabbi Zalmanov, or Zalmanov, is a Lubavitcher family. It's a name in Chabad, Zalmanov. There were 2 brothers. One lived in Bnei Brak, and one lived in I think, Tel Aviv, Kfar Chabad. They've both since passed on. They lived into their 90s, I think. And they had a father and an uncle. Both were Talmidim, I think, in Lubavitcher, in the original yeshiva, and they were a Lubavitcher family from way back. So this Reb Shmuel Zalmanov was his name. It was very close to the previous Rebbe, like a friend almost, you know. And he was very bright and very learned, and he was a great writer, and you can see that he was talented. So he told over this story. Again, whether he was there, I don't know, but I rely on him because he was in the inside. So he told over that the night of Yud Shevat, the night, Motzei Shabbos, last night, the Rebbetzin, the previous Rebbe's wife, her name was Nechama Dina, Rebbetzin Nechama Dina, she called both son-in-laws in. She said, I want to see both of you. And she brought them into the room where the holy body of the previous Rebbe was lying on the floor. You know, that's before you're buried, you're supposed to lie on the floor. You know that. You put the body on the floor. And she said, in front of my husband, I want you both to give him an agreement that you're going to live in peace. And that you're not going to, argue and make issues. She didn't have to specify, who's going to be the Rebbe, who's not going to be the Rebbe, and everything else. This happened 71 years ago last night. And I never heard that before, and it's a very interesting story and insight that although, her husband just passed away, and although there was a question who would become the next Rebbe at the time, by some, including her, okay? And it seems to me, as far as she was concerned, she didn't want to appoint anyone to be Rebbe. She wanted it to ride and to give each one positions, the positions that they held while the previous Rebbe was what's it called? I'm not looking at you. I'm looking right at you. You don't see me?
You're not. It looks like you're looking at the screen, like somewhere. You're looking down. We don't see your eyes. You're not like looking at us.
Now?
It's better. Better.
Now?
It's better.
Okay. Okay. I don't know.
Don't worry about it.
Okay. Anyway.
Don't worry.
Okay. So what she wanted, the way it seems to me, is that things should just ride. In other words, Rabbi Gerar was in charge of the Lubavitcher yeshivas, which in the 40s, there were 14 yeshivas in the East Coast, in Rochester, in Buffalo, in Springfield, in Philadelphia, in Boston. So he was in charge, and of course the main yeshiva in Crown Heights in 770. And the Rebbe was in charge of Merkez Linyonei Chinuch, Machne Yisrael, and Kahos, the three organizations for education and publications and outreach and all that. So, and things were going nicely. So from her vantage point, it should continue that way. And if you take a look at her stationery, she had stationery, it said Nechama Dina Schneerson. So after Yud Shevat, she sent out a letter and other letters during the year. And you see her name is in the middle, and her two son-in-laws, her older one is below on the right, and the Rebbe is to the left, below. So in other words, she just wanted it to go that way. This way we avoid conflict and controversy. It didn't go her way because most Chassidim wanted the Rebbe to become the Rebbe. And this supports, one second, another story that Reb Zalman told me that day that I interviewed him. A fascinating story. Listen to the story and then Moshe will tell you. Zalman was in Fall River, Massachusetts at the time, working with college students, okay? And others. I'm talking about 1951, 52. And 1950, I'm not sure if he was there already in 1950 because he was in Rochester in 49, so I'm not sure where he was in 50. I think he says he was in Fall River. Anyway, he came. He was there when the previous Rebbe passed away. He was in Crown Heights. Maybe he was in Crown Heights. I don't know. And then he goes to Fall River, and he comes back the next time to Crown Heights Purim time. So it's a month, right? The Shvat, Yud Shevat, Purim is Tesvav Adar, Yudalit Adar. It's a month later or so. And in 770, in the upstairs, there's a long corridor. I told you on the right is the Beis Medrash, on the left is the Rebbe's room, right? There's a long corridor. At the end of the corridor, there's a sink. It seems like that sink was there since the 1940s, and earlier when the man built the house. By the way, the person who built the house was a doctor, and he was very wealthy, obviously. And he had the material brought from Italy and other countries. I mean, there's a whole book about Book of 770, and Rabbi Havlin in Ramat Shlomo emulated that building and like almost precisely with the bricks to get the bricks. Anyway, and the Rebbe sees him, and he sees that he's washing his hands. So the Rebbe says to him, "I assume you were by the oil, and you're washing your hands coming back from a cemetery." So he says, "Yeah." So the Rebbe says, I hope you there's a traditional saying that you wish someone when you hear them either going to a tzaddik's cave or coming, Ois beten sich als gut, which is Yiddish for asking of the tzaddik to intercede on your part to Hashem for everything good. Okay? And the Rebbe says that to him. Then the Rebbe does something in a way uncharacteristic, but it looks like, with Zalman, he had an open type of dialogue, because Zalman was that type of guy, he didn't mince words, and he enjoyed conversation and dialogue. So he says, "Was hast du gefragt beim Rebbe?" What did you ask the Rebbe, the previous Rebbe? You went to the Yoyo, right? What did you ask him? You can imagine, which chassid today would ask the Rebbe, that's what happened. Well, Zalman says, he said, I told him three things. One, that we should have a Rebbe, right? It's a month after the previous Rebbe passed away. Things are in limbo. We don't know what's going on. So the first thing, there should be a Rebbe. Then he said number two, and he points at him, you should be the Rebbe. And number three, he says that Hashem should bless you with children. And he says that they held hands. Again, if that's Zalman's version or not, I'll let you answer that, because it's not, but that they held hands and they both were crying. That happened around Purim, 1950. Moshe, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, going back
to
a second, what you said about the Rebbe's in the Chamadina. Stationary, the names. She wanted things to the status quo. I've heard, I don't remember if we spoke about this in the shir, but I've heard in other places, maybe it's just because what I was reading about the last 2-3 weeks or so, that I've heard it said that she felt that her husband was like her husband was like the last Rebbe. In other words, the Rebbe Rayatz. In other words, that she. Still, some people go into her, so to speak.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. That is true. That is true. She didn't have. Yeah, go ahead. What?
No. So how did she, on a practical? Well, two things. On her view, one is what was her view, and two, on a practical level, obviously she saw that in 1951, Yud Shevat, and the first yard said that her younger son-in-law became the Rebbe. She obviously saw that, and she lived quite a number of years after that. So I guess my question on a practical level, how did she deal with it?
Okay, so number one, like I just said, I just answered the first question. She wanted everything just to ride, to be the way it was. Each one has their institutions they're in charge of, and there's no official Rebbe. And whether she, and that she, formally her husband would be the last Rebbe. That's correct. And you're right, she lived 20 years, not just a few years. She passed away in Asara B'Tevis, so 1970 or 71. I think 71.
71, right?
Yeah, that's 21 years. Okay, that's a long time. Now, to answer your second question, Hasidim chose the Rebbe, not 51 Yud Shevat that you're referring to, which is 70 years from yesterday, but really already most of the year they were gravitating to him. Most, not all. She had a hard time with it, and there were very, very sharp exchanges in writing, some of which I have. And it wasn't that she was, the way I see it, it's not that she knew that the Rebbe is a massive Talmud Chacham and everything else. She was a smart woman. She knew the score. But nevertheless, she had a daughter. And her daughter, Rabbi Garari's wife, was a powerhouse and very opinionated and very powerful. And the daughter had a husband and had a son, Barry Garari. So, but it's really her. It's really the mother, her daughter, Chana. She wanted. She said like this: if anyone's going to be a Rebbe, it should be my husband, because he's older, and he has also he learned in Lubavitcher. The Rebbe, many arguments that she presented. Okay, and the Hasidim basically, 3 Hasidim, they made a committee, and they tried pacifying her and working with her, but at the same time not conceding on their decision. She wasn't accepting of that, and she just went to the side. You could jump up and down, but if you don't have the people with you, it's not going to help you. And that's what happened here. And there's another point you need to know, that amongst the older Chassidim, the Rashabs, Talmidim, right? Most of them in Crown Heights. We're talking about, they were the ones like calling the shots, because they were right there. They sided with the Rebbe. They wanted, although he was much more closed, but A, they had issues with Garari, okay? That's one point. B, they saw that this person is something special. So, regardless of her opinion, which is the previous Rebbe's wife, they wanted to consider it. But when they felt that we need, for the younger generation, we need a Rebbe, and some of them had this in mind, we will kind of educate him. We will form him, because he's only 50 years old, right? 48 years old, right? The Rebbe was 48 when he became 49, right? So they also weren't pure in their thinking, okay? Off the record. They also were, we're going to put someone there to drive the ship, to drive, to be the captain, but we will guide him. Yes, Yaakov.
What was the age difference between them?
So let's say one Reb Shmuel Avitn, he was born in 1883. That's 19-year difference. Rabbi Elia Simpson, because Rabbi Simpson was totally on the Rebbe's side. What?
Between the Rishag and the Ramash.
Oh, the Rishag and Ramash was 1899, about 3 years, 3 years. 3 years.
Oh, that's significant.
Yeah. So again, therefore, to answer your question there were some, in the beginning, sharp exchanges. They basically said, either you come along with us or you're going to be sidelined. And that's what happened. She was sidelined. And recently they published from an auction house a letter, it's online, you could probably read it, where she's like writing to, I think, Rabbi Havlin in Yerushalayim, and she's, or to someone, and she's like, she's talking out loud, like, could you get them to stop? In other words, she felt very, very ostracized. And she was ostracized. Why? because she was going against the majority of the people. And she just went to the way. And since 1951 till she passed away, she pretty much was marginalized. Yes.
Let me just really quickly on that note. Just really quickly, she's not buried. Her kever.
No, she is. Yes, it's right. It's by. There's 3 Rebbitzins. They're there by in the Yoel. No, Chamadina. You're talking about Chana Gerari. No, she refused. The Rebbe begged her and asked, and she refused to be buried there, and it's very tragic in the Yoel. She's buried in the Munkach. There's a picture online. Used to be a picture of Barry walking his mother out. From here in Borough Park, 14th Avenue, the building, the Munkacher Shul. She went to speak to the Munkacher Rebbe about buying a plot in Munkach.
Which is in Queens.
I'm not sure where it is.
It's a different Beis Tzachayim.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's out in New Jersey. I think it's in the Mount.
It is New Jersey.
Out there.
Yeah. And where's the Rashag buried?
Right next to the Rebbe on the right hand side, the previous Rebbe.
The Rashag.
The Rashag, Reb Shmaya Gerari.
He's right outside the oil?
Yes.
Okay,
Yonason.
Yeah, it could be that's why Barry turned out the way he was, anti.
Let's stay to everything could be.
Okay.
You have to read, Yonason. I wrote a 40-page article on Barry Gerari in my first volume, Chabad Portraits #1. After you read that, you'll have an understanding of his philosophy and everything else. Chabad Portraits 1. Yes, Yoni, you want to say something? I don't hear you.
Rav Gerari, Chana's husband, the Rebbitzins' husband, what was his name?
No, the Rebbitzin Chaya Mushka or Chana Gerari?
Chana Gerari.
His name was Shmaryo, Rabbi Shmaryo Gerari. And his acronym was Rashag.
Rashag. Okay, so what I understand is that the Rebbe didn't want to be the Rebbe, right? They had to run after him literally to be the Rebbe. He didn't want to be the Rebbe.
That's correct.
Did the Rashag wanted to be the Rebbe?
Yes.
He also he did want to be the Rebbe.
Yes.
So how did the two of them reconcile with that?
Now, 1 second. Whether he wanted himself or his wife wanted him to be Rebbe, and therefore he said, I'll do it, I think it's the latter. Because of Chana Gerari, her husband said, okay, I'll do it. Now, what was your last question, Yoni? What?
No, so my question was if the Rebbe and Rav Gerari, if they ever actually, came to some kind of...
Absolutely. You guys would have loved last night's farbreng, and I spoke all about this. 1953, there was a Rebbe in Borough Park who came from Shanghai, and you've heard his name, Amshinov. This Amshinov a Rebbe is, I think, grandfather. His name was Shimon. They called him Reb Shimonol. And he was very tight with the previous Rebbe, because he lived in Otvotsk. So he and the Frierdiker Rebbe, when the previous Rebbe came to Otvotsk, they were very close. And when the Lubavitchers escaped to Shanghai, the previous Rebbe told them, ask the Amshinov Rebbe for direction and listen to him. And then he makes his way to Williamsburg, Borough Park, to Brooklyn, and he hears that the two brother-in-laws, there's a schism there with the families, whatever, And I have to clarify that the Rebbe and the Rebbitzin were not fighting. They were being fought. And I'm not saying this because I'm his chassid. It's facts, okay? Like you said, he was running away from it. But then Chassidim put all this pressure, and they put ads in newspapers, and they kind of crown him as the Lubavitcher Rebbe, on Yud Shevat. And if you listen to the first mimer, which you surely should, and he says clearly, if you think I'm going to, do the work for you, that's not Lubavitch, that's not Chabad. In our system of Chassidus, you got to do it yourself. We will help whatever we could do, but you got to do it yourself. So he shunned away from saying, I'm taking the responsibility, I'm the Rebbe and all that. Anyway, so the Amshinover Rebbe heard that there's the schism. So one day, Rabbi Leibel Groner Shalom told over the story, and he was there. He was, even in those days, in 53. So he said that one day, the Amshinover Rebbe shows up at 770. He doesn't ask any questions. He walks upstairs to the previous Rebbe's room, to the Rashag's apartment. 3rd floor, right? I told you, the 3rd floor. And he says, I'm not leaving here until I get a commitment from you that you're going to live in peace with your brother-in-law. He gets the commitment. He goes down 2 floors. He goes down 2 floors to the Rebbe's room, the Rebbe's Yechidus room, and he goes in and he says, "I'm not leaving here until I get a commitment from you." The following Shabbos, Farbrengen, or whatever the next Farbrengen was, Rabbi Garari showed up at the Farbrengen. Until then, he didn't come to the Farbrengens. So Rabbi Groner says that it was the Amshinover Rebbe who brought them together in a way that, and from that day on, I could tell you, Rabbi Garari was the biggest chassid of the Rebbe. And the beginning, what did he say? He realized, he said, if he can go to the Ohel so often and say that this is what he hear, this is what my father-in-law, our father-in-law is saying and wants, I can't match that. And he knew the Rebbe, he knew what kind of person he was, And if he says, if he can talk to a stone and hear what the stone says, the caver, he's on a different level. I can't, and he became his biggest chassid. And I can tell you many stories proving how everything, both from the financial end, when people gave the yeshiva big monies, he had an agreement, the first 50% goes to the Rebbe. I mean, in many ways, it wasn't just lip service. And unfortunately, the family didn't come along. So it didn't just erupt in 1985 with the Sfarim. It goes back to 53, 54, 55, and all those years when he became the Rebbe's chassid, and they couldn't handle it. It's like, this is too much for us. So they were basically just left to the wayside. And it was very sad, but that's the Metzias. There's a point in life, if you don't join them, you become irrelevant. Unless you have your own cup of tea. And in their mind, they had their own cup of tea, but it's a joke. What no one's with you. Like, what? So this is not just true in our dynasty, it's in other dynasties. But I could say that until 1985, I don't want you to make the mistake, until 1985 things were smooth outwardly. Things ran. There was no fights. In fact, until I grew up in Lubavitcher, I had no idea about libraries and Sfarim, who they belong to, they don't belong to, and family. All this I'm telling you is from, as an adult, researching and finding out. Since probably that 1985 is when we started to say, ooh, interesting, what's going on? But all those years, things were quiet, and the average student in yeshiva had no idea what's going on. Nothing. Let's continue. So, the Rebbe becomes Rebbe, and then in 1951, exactly 70 years ago, a chassid by the name of Rabbi Sender Netzach, I think he was born in 1870, a Lubavitcher. He was Dr. Rabbi Nissim Mendel's father-in-law. He lived in England, then he moved to America. Anyway, he gets up at the Farbrengen and he says, and he's he's like 32 years older than the Rebbe. He says, hearing talks from you is wonderful, but Hasidim need and want to hear a mimer. That's what he said. In front of everybody. Now, when I say in front of everyone, there were 200 people in the room, not 2,000 people, but there were people. And the Rebbe then started to say, Basi Legani, but he began with, my father-in-law says, Basi Legani. Like he wouldn't say that I'm saying Basi Legani. I'm repeating what my father-in-law said. And of course, it was his mimer that he based on his father-in-law's mimer, which was written, which was published for the yahrzeit. Let me explain this. The last 5 to 10 years of the previous Rebbe's life, he was ill, as you know. He was wheelchair bound. He had MS, and then he had a stroke in 45. He wasn't a well man. He had some better years, worse years, his health, but overall it wasn't great health. And Chassidim, Lubavitcher Chassidim, a Rebbe in Lubavitch was mimer. Conversation, farbrengens, it's nice and very important, but what establishes the Chabad ethos is the mimer Chassidus. No? He's not feeling well enough to say a mimer. He's not well enough to write his own mimerim. So what he did is he instructed his younger son-in-law, our Rebbe. He told him to take which mimerim that he had said in the 1920s and 30s and to republish them for Yud Kislev, 1944, 45, 46, 47, 48, to add references. And he wrote, I think, sometimes a new beginning and end. And that became the mimer of 1948, Yud Kislev. So this mimer, Basi Legani, that we all study and talk about for Yud Shevat, was originally said, Parshas Boy, 1923. And you could take out the Sefer and look at that mimer, it's printed today, and you will see almost word for word the same mimer. Yes, Hillel.
Didn't we learn that?
No, we never learned that mimer in 1923. Maybe we learned it in Basi Legani. I don't remember.
Okay.
Go back. So the previous Rebbe had the Rebbe prepare 4 Maimorim for 4 events. Yud Shevat, Yud Gimel Shvat, Purim, and Beis Nissen. Yud Shevat is the yahrzeit of his grandmother, right? The Rebbe Rivka. The other day is the yahrzeit of another... not his mother. Anyway, and Purim and Beis Nissen is his father. So he had 4 Maimorim prepared that Chassidim should learn for these 4 special occasions. That Maimer, Yud Shevat, begins with Basi Legani. And in that Maimer, it's interesting, he speaks about a person doesn't know how long they will live. And that Shabbos, the Maimer came from the print house Friday afternoon. The Rebbe, who was in charge of kahos and printing, brought it to the previous Rebbe, and that Shabbos morning, the previous Rebbe passed away. What does he talk about in the 11th chapter? There's 20 Oisias. And each year, the Rebbe would say a full mimer on one of the Oisias, one of the chapters. So this year, 2021, Tafshin Pei Aleph, would be in the cycle of learning Basi Legani, the 11th chapter. And what does he talk about? Netzach. That a king, in order to be victorious in war, he needs foot soldiers. And he's willing to squander, he's willing to squander his treasures that he never opened up and never looked at, that were given to him and left from generation to generation from his ancestors. But it comes a point where if he wants to be victorious, and if he doesn't open his treasures, he might not, so he squanders that. And he's willing to give up everything, including his own life, for victory. And the Rebbe, the previous Rebbe and our Rebbe, elaborates on this thought that the koyach of Netzach. You know, some of you had your sons or maybe grandsons or in the army. And I was thinking about this yesterday. What drives a soldier in the army? It's their dedication to the cause. If you don't have the dedication to the cause, you're going to be a draft dodger. If not today, tomorrow. If not tomorrow, later. And what's the cause? Hashem should be victorious. Godliness should prevail in the world. And that drives you. And that drives you that you're willing, and let's say it the way it is. You're willing to go out to the front, even if it means you might be killed. I mean, we could live in theory. But a real soldier knows that he can be killed. But he's willing to do it for the cause. This, the Rebbe says in Ruchnius, is Netzach, is the midah of endurance. The midah of endurance of Netzach is so powerful that you'll do anything for it. And if you stop for a moment and think, it's true this way also in the negative. A person who has to be the bottom line, the victor, will do anything. Okay? Some say, lahavdil, Trump has that element. Obviously Hashem is even greater than that, because the essence is even greater than Netzach. But victory drives a person. Endurance. So the Frierdiker Rebbe in his Maimer talks about the name Tzivos. There are 7 holy names of Hashem. One of them is Tzivos. And it's actually from Tanakh by Chana over there. So, army, Tzava. So this mimer in this chapter this year, and if you haven't yet learned it, please do read it. It's a lot of deep things, but get to the meat, the Tzava. What do we want with a Tzava? And especially in Eretz Yisrael, where the boys and the girls, they're in the Tzava. It's not a joke, in the army. And what's going on over here? And I think if we open this up and talk about it to those those people that were in the army, are in the army, going to the army, to understand what the purpose, why are you going to the army? There's a purpose here. Am Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, Teiras Yisrael. Otherwise, why would you go and risk being killed? Are you out of your mind? You're doing it because there's a higher cause and purpose. So, if you go to the army, but go with a purpose. And if you go with a purpose, you'll come out b'shleimut. You'll come out fine. And so this is discussed in this year's chapter, and I wanted to mention it so we don't get, it's nice to hear the history and everything else. It's fascinating. But we have to know that the Maimer Basi Legani is a Maimer that by the Rebbe, I heard from Rabbi Herson of Morristown, he would farbreng with us once a year, only once a year, on Yud Shevat. And he said that Rabbi Chadakov, his superior, the Rebbe's closest secretary, told him that by the Rebbe, the calendar changes every Yud Shevat. By most people, it's Rosh Hashanah. By some people, it's January 1st. And by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, his calendar begins Yud Shevat. A deep insight. That's a deep insight. Why? Because, and I see a question here about succession, and, Lubavitch and Chabad. Basically, Lubavitch is the name of the city in which our movement was 102 years, from 1812 or so, 1813 till 1916 or so. So that's why we became known as the Lubavitcher Hasidim, because this little village, a real little village with lots of mud and dirt. And even today, you could go there and you'll feel like you're in Lubavitch 100 years ago. So it was called Lubavitch Chassidim. But the philosophy is Chochmah Bina Das. So really, Chabad and Lubavitch are synonymous, but one is about the philosophy and one's about the locale. And as far as the succession issue, it's a long discussion. It's not for now. But what I could tell you is that if you understand, if you learn, and we're learning every day Chassidus, and we need more people to learn Chassidus. If you learn Chassidus and more Chassidus, these things fall into place. They just fall into place. Well, how do they fall into place? Because you become sensitized to another reality. And that's the purpose of Musar and Chassidus and Torah. That our paradigm should not be the Gashmius. Our paradigm should be Beruchnius. And if you live with Ruchnius, and to live with Ruchnius is a daily job. It doesn't happen, for 10 years I was davening. And what happened the next year? You took a hiatus and you went to play golf? No, that means you really weren't davening. You were doing a job. And we've been learning this in the Maimarim of the different Rabbeim. And we've tasted now pretty much, we're almost finished Kunter Shemayim. We learned so much of the Rashab, and you see how he approaches it. And we learned the Frierdiker Rebbe, and we've tasted from the Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe, Tanya. So the idea of succession is a real one. It's not one that you can fantasize. It's a real one. At the same time, it has to be real within the system that you're working with. Not real within a second system, because it doesn't work. You see, if you identify with a certain system and you want that system to work, you need to know the ethos and mechanics of that system. And if you don't know them, then just saying, well, just take someone who's learned and who seems holy, and will appoint him to be a Rebbe. It doesn't work that way. It does not work that way. Because it won't work. Not in our system. It works in many other groups. It's true. But in the Lubavitch system, the guy would go flying a week after. It would be a joke. Okay? There's a system here. And just like Rabbi Garari, who was a great man and a special man, but when it came to appointing a Rebbe, that's someone who sees your neshama, someone who could tell you belong in Wyoming or you belong in Japan. You know the famous story with the chaplain. What's his name? That chaplain. It's online. He was what's his name? Moshe.
Okay.
What? Tokayer. Thank you, Marvin Tokayer. He's a newly married man. He goes to the Rebbe for a blessing, and the Rebbe says they need a chaplain in Osaka, I forget, somewhere. He says, Rebbe, I just got married. The Rebbe says, consider it. It's a good idea. They need someone like you. You'll make a difference. He says, somehow he listened. He doesn't know how, but he listened. And he was there for 20, 30 years, and he saw that what the Rebbe said is correct. He made a very big difference. For someone to take the responsibility to tell you, as a newly married man, go across the world, leave everything behind, it only can be understood if you believe in neshama, eruchnius, that your neshama needs this. In other words, and you will have a good life if you follow what your neshama needs, not what your body needs. Because your body, what am I going to go there? It's ridiculous. So, this type of a person doesn't come just by putting up someone to be a pinch hitter. It does not work. But that's our system. I'm not saying that's every system. I remember hearing there was a Yid in Los Angeles, Rabbi Weiss. I've told you about him. Shmuel and I knew him. A very big philanthropist from Hungary and a real old-style Yid. And he contacted here in Borough Park a young man from a Rebbeische family who I think he was involved with in Europe, the Kussen, the Rottenberg family. They were called the Kussener Rebbes, and one of the derivatives. And he said, "Listen, I'm going to pay for everything. I'm going to buy you a house and open a base medrash and get you your Streimel and your Bekisha and everything. And you need to do one thing. I'm going to send you tapes somehow, or recordings of your grandfather. You have to listen to this and get to know the script and the songs and the tune and open shop." And that's what happened. And that's it. What?
Wait, that was Rabbi Rottenberg?
I'm not sure if it was Rottenberg. Maybe it was someone else. I don't remember.
No, I'll tell you why. Because I used to daven by the Kussen of Shul in Brooklyn, and his name was Rabbi Rottenberg.
You mean in Borough Park?
No, on Avenue R and 27th.
I don't know. So maybe it's a brother. I don't know. But anyway, so what I'm saying is that this issue of, succession in the Chabad system what Beryl Wise did will never work in Chabad. I don't care how much money you have. It won't get anywhere, okay? Now, I'm not saying you could just, one could say, well, you guys are wrong. No problem. But I'm telling you what the system is. You don't have to belong to the system. You don't have to like the system, but this is the system. So in this system, we look for someone of that quality, and we look for someone who, a Rebbe before, you hear this? Another point. A Rebbe before indicates, hints to someone being the next leader. And our Rebbe did not do that. Okay? Anyone tells you stories, Baruch Shemesh Nerson of Chabin, it's all baloney stories times 2. Okay? It's nonsense. The Rebbe did not indicate. You know why he didn't indicate? Because he looked at himself as a shliach of the previous Rebbe. And basically, like he told Rabbi Yalis of Philadelphia in 1984, and it's printed, I believe, when Rabbi Yalis, who was from the previous Rebbe's friends, and became the Rebbe's friend, of course, and just like Zalman Schechter, dialogued with the Rebbe his way, Rabbi Yalis, with his Streimel and his Yichus, opened his mouth, and he said to the Rebbe, he says, what is going to be after 120 years of your life? Right?
I got to run, but thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Rebbe became very serious. And he said, Was wilt ihr von mir? What do you want from me? Go to my father-in-law. Geht's nem schwer. And the Rebbe's words are consistent with his 42 years of father-in-law, father-in-law, father-in-law. He never looked at himself as, I am the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and I make these decisions, which we know he did, but it was all coming from, I'm appointed by my father-in-law. When Hashem takes him, it's my father-in-law's issue, not mine. Now again, you'll say, this is not logical. It is or it isn't. That's the reality. That's a fact. Okay? Now, of course, the argument to that is that, not the argument, but the Rebbe believes so much in Mashiach that Mashiach will come, and then the previous Rebbe will come back with everyone else, and we'll work it out. Whatever you're going to say, but that's the Metzias HaDvorim. What the Rebbe did say, Avi, and he said this since the Rebbe's passing in 1988, the Rebbe said that every chassid should find Rabbonim and Mashpiyim and get their opinion on matters dealing with all issues of life, from the physical to the spiritual. And I remember hearing that sikha. I wasn't there. I was in California, and I heard about the sikha and then read it, and then maybe I heard it during the week on a recording, and he was repeating this over and over and over, and I was wondering, Rebbe, why are you being so repetitious, Now I understand why, because a lot of people, they play around with this. They don't take it seriously, meaning that when you have a question, especially if it's a life question, you should go to three rabbanim, or 3 mashpiyim, or 3 friends, or 3 businessmen. And based on what they tell you, that's what you should do. Not you should walk away from saying, I got your opinion now, and I'll make my own decision. Then you're not following the Rebbe's advice. That's the truth. You're not. Then what? You don't really have a Rebbe. You don't identify. You're basically making your own decision. You hear from others' opinions. It's not about opinions here. If you want the koyach HaTorah vis-a-vis this particular tzaddik, the Rebbe, to help you in your avodas Hashem and everything else, then listen to his advice. And this was the advice that he gave. So, of course, it's much easier to see a physical person and to hear a physical person, but, there's so much writing from the Rebbe, so much Torah, and today there's so much videos in any language, that if a person really wants to know what the Rebbe's opinion is and wants to live with that and wants to make that part of the reality, they can. But let's call a spade a spade. A lot of us, and a lot of times, we don't want to. From the biggest Hasidim, we don't want to. Hey, there's an expression, Emacht Shabbos vazich alein. He makes his own Sabbath. Hey, I can sit in Brooklyn, in Ramat Bet Shemesh, on the screen, the best of both worlds, see all the videos, and, and even have an inspiration, and then do whatever. Who's going to know? Stays. That's why we need to learn Chassidus. When you learn Chassidus, and Chassidus opens your eyes to what the reality is, then to yourself you say, I have to make a change. I have to make a move. Because, it's talking to me. There's an expression of the Rebbe Rashab, listen to this expression, that the Alter Rebbe with Chabad Chassidus brought a person face to face with God. That's what Chassidus is. Bringing us face to face with Hashem. And when you're face to face with Hashem, you can't lie, because you will melt. You're face to face with Hashem. The Alter Rebbe in his Chassidus, in Chabad Chassidus, gave a Yid the ability to be face to face with Hashem and automatically to be honest and truthful. So the Chaim, the Eibusher helped that on this great day, Yud Shevat, I want to suggest as an end to this farbreng something very practical and real. And I say that as an introduction because I shared this with my wife, and she says, well, this is a hard hachlata. And this is my resolution and my suggestion for all of you. By next year, Yud Shevat, if Mashiach Chas v'Shalom doesn't come, everyone here should have 70 new people that they've introduced to Chabad Chassidus in one way or the other. Whether it's through a WhatsApp group, through a phone call, through an email, through a text. And today with social media, I think this is very easy. I'm not saying to make 70 Balei Tshuva. Halavai, we could go out and make 70 Balei Tshuva by next year. Not saying that. But 70 contacts? And you should keep a ledger. And every month you should look at your ledger and see how many new people, not the people you know. From Eish Kodesh, Moshe is the Gabbai, he knows a lot of people. Wonderful. Now what about 70 new people that he doesn't know yet, and he speaks to them, or he sends them an email, he shares a video, and they respond? That's already a relationship. And it's a relationship that's important. Especially today with COVID, people are locked up, people are down, and everything else. So that's my suggested resolution. Help yourself and help me and help HaKadosh Baruch Hu do this. So, because last night at this farbreng that I led in Crown Heights, there were a few Lakewood boys that came. They came for Shabbos. They know Yud Shevat by Lubavitcher is a special day. So they walked into the farbreng. So I had them sit next to me and we're talking farbreng. And I said, I'd like everyone. I said the same thing to the people there. I want everyone to consider giving the Rebbe 70 new contacts, 70 new, right? So one of the boys, I turned to him, I said, did you hear what I said? He says, yes. He says, what do you mean? What do you mean give the Rebbe, give Hashem 7? What am I giving? A very different way of approaching and thinking, not a Lubavitcher boy. And I started to explain to him, I told him we have to talk more. And someone else said, in Lubavitch, in Chabad, we don't just mooch from the Rebbe, we give. You give HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you don't just take. In general, in Chabad, the whole idea of taking was vulgar, was disgusting. What taking? Who are you to take? But to give? Oh, to give? No, that was questions. What do you mean giving a person who's passed on? We have to talk about it. But the idea is, if you really honor the Rebbe's neshama, that it's 70 years later, going to the 71st year, bring him a gift. Bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu a gift. Vis-a-vis this particular tzaddik in this situation. So that's my humble, if you have another suggestion, another idea, do it. But I think it's something that's attainable. And if you do it with a cheshbon, you keep a ledger. Because if you just go, I'm going to do it, and then you wake up a month before, next Yud Shevat, and you say, wait a minute, I didn't do any of it, or I did very little. You're not. But if you keep a cheshbon, you keep a little note on your computer, on your phone, or a pad, and every Friday I send out between 5 to 10 texts or WhatsApp to people around the country that I know for years. And I just say to them 2 words or 3 words. Great Shabbos, good Shabbos, sei gesund. And like there's nothing much in my few words. Almost everyone responds. Thanks, Rabbi. Indeed, you too. How long does it take? Minutes to do that. You're telling me even on a Friday you don't have 3, 4, 5 minutes to do that? You do. But you got to think about them. So everyone should really introduce people to Chassidus, especially in Bet Shemesh, where you all are. Yaakov's in Chicago, but as I say, I was there. People are open to Chassidus. Doesn't mean they're becoming Lubavitcher, and nor should that be the thinking. We're not here into making people Lubavitcher. We're here to exposing and expressing HaKadosh Baruch Hu through a wonderful system of learning, in this case, Chassidus. And when people will learn Chassidus, I'm telling you, they'll find more shleimus hanefesh, more menuchat hanefesh. And it's a whole different experience. So you'll be doing them a favor if you expose them to Chassidus. And again, I'm not saying they have to be on our the middle of the day, and them are working, can't. But like I told you, this from Rabbi Malinowitz Shalom's shul, this person contacted me. He started to learn Tanya with a chavrusa. I was there 3 years ago. Rabbi Malinowitz made a whole sturm about it. And he said, Rabbi Malinowitz told me at the time to learn at Tanya, to learn at Yeshir, whatever. It didn't work out for me. And now he's seriously learning with a chavrusa. Gewaldig. Because he's learning, and it's going to help his neshama. It's going to help his family. So, Chevre, don't walk away from this farbreng and saying, Rabbi Dalfin and Rabbi Faro and a few others, you are the rabbis, you're the shluchim, you're the Rebbe's people, you were the Rebbe, and it's your job. It's our job, every one of us. And there's so many people that, Moshe, you know so many people from your work that we don't know. And only you can make an impact on them. I can't. Because I don't know them, and you have a certain relationship with them. And the same with Yaakov, and the same with Yoni, and the same with Yonason. Right? You're mamish in, and you're there in Eretz Yisrael with all the Frimme Yidden. I'm saying where you live, right? And all the nonsense and all the arguments put aside. Don't get involved. Don't get involved. In Chabad and Lubavitcher, and Rebbe's alive, Rebbe's dead, Mashiach here. Don't get involved with any of that stuff. Just discard it. Look, let's learn Chassidus. Take a look at a video. Forget about Mishagas. You're not here for that. Don't engage in that conversation. Because as soon as you engage in the conversation, you've lost. You've lost their respect. Yes, there's a time when we're going to dialogue and debate a certain issue today. Okay, there's a time for that. But even then, you need to be the right person, and you need to have the right information, and you need to be sensitive. It's a whole different. But for the average person, it's not that way. Anyway, Chevra, I want to end and wish everyone that all the brachas. I haven't gone yet to the oil. I have your information with Hashem. We'll Hashem mention it and remind it. I still have it on my phone. That Hashem should help that in the schus of the Baal HaYilula, the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak ben Reb Sholem Dov Ber, and the schus of our Rebbe ben Reb Levi Yitzchak, Rav Levi Yitzchak, they should be a Melech Yosher for Klal Yisrael. They should bring only good things and brachas, and each and every one of us should be blessed with number one, good health. We need our health. Good health. And number two, with parnasa. And number three, with shidduchim. And number four, with nachas, Yiddish nachas, from children, grandchildren. And ultimately, the ultimate bracha is Mashiach should come, not in a fantasy way, but in a real way, where there'll be an end to all the tzaras, and we'll have only simcha, and these tzaddikim, and all other tzaddikim, and the doilim will come back, and will really be biyachad, will be truly together. And what does it mean to be together? Just to be together. Not this drasha and this thing and this. Just to be together. Jews being together and just kvelling about being together. L'chaim to everyone. L'chaim. Tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem, we'll learn the Maimer. We're almost going to, I hope this week to finish the Kunter Shamayin. So join us, and everyone should have a great day. Seid gesund. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi Dalfin.
Yeah, you're welcome. Also, I want to say the Rebbe speaks about chitas. So if you improve on your chitas, if you haven't said chitas, and it's a guarantee to bring brachas. So the Rebbe always mentioned the Yud Shevat. So I shared that, please, and share with your family. The Chayenu, a beginning. What? And to learn, of course, to learn, to take, a little more time to learn it. And it's good. It's a very important thing. Sei gesund. Bye-bye. Shalom.